Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. You may know our MC as the Emmy-winning political and legal analyst for WGN TV News, anchor of the WGN TV Political Report, seen every Sunday morning at 9 a.m., and host of the popular WGN radio podcast Behind the Curtain, and the author of several award-winning books. Please join me in welcoming Paul Lisnek.
Good evening. Good evening, and it is good to see everybody here again. Welcome to the Les Turner ALS Foundation's 35th annual Hope Through Caring Gala. It's a delight for me and for all of us to be back with this extraordinary ALS community. Tonight I'm serving as your MC for the evening. Since it was founded in 1977, the Les Turner ALS Foundation has been dedicated to providing the most comprehensive care and support to people living with ALS, their caregivers, and their families. Now, through its Les Turner ALS Center and the Lois Insolia ALS Clinic at Northwestern Medicine, people with ALS receive world-class clinical care, access to clinical trials, and hope through scientific research. None of this would be possible without your support. And tonight is an occasion to come together as a community, celebrate the commitment that we share, and take the next steps towards a world free of ALS. Now tonight, our honorees have indeed achieved great things on their own, but what's most remarkable about them is what they have inspired in the lives of others. Tonight, we're recognizing First Bank Chicago for their long-standing support of ALS grant programs, and Sandra, Abrevaya, and Brian Wallach, who have transformed the face of ALS advocacy. Absolutely incredible people. Please acknowledge them. But first, I want to begin by welcoming to the stage the Foundation's board chair, Aaron Reardon-Cohn, and CEO, Andrea Pauls Bachman.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Aaron Reardon-Cohn. We have a full house tonight. There are over 400 people in the room and watching online, including more than 50 people living with ALS and their guests. For many of us, this is a very personal cause. Nothing will ever be the same after you hear that diagnosis, whether it's for yourself or someone that you love. That's what the family and friends of Les Turner felt when he was diagnosed with ALS at the age of 36. That's why they founded the Les Turner ALS Foundation, because they were determined that people living with ALS would have the resources and support that were unavailable to Les and his family in 1977. Today, what they created is one of the world's leading ALS organizations. Over the past 46 years, the Les Turner ALS Foundation has directly funded over $32 million in ALS research. And clinical care at the Les Turner ALS Center at Northwestern Medicine, as well as millions more in indirect funding. In compassion, dedication, and expertise, our support services team and clinicians are second to none. Our support groups provide solace and companionship for people living with ALS, caregivers, and families who are coping with the loss of their loved ones. We act with urgency and purpose because that's what the ALS community deserves. I am so happy to be together tonight because I can look across the room and say to our donors and sponsors and everyone involved in the work we do. You are fulfilling a vision that goes all the way back to the family and friends of Les Turner, and you are building an extraordinary legacy of your own. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Good evening, everyone. I'm Andrea Pauls-Backman. You may have heard about why this is an exciting time in ALS care and research, but I want to take a moment to connect that excitement to the people in this room. Until recently, there was only one drug approved by the FDA to slow the progression of ALS. Then in 2017, another. And now in the last 12 months, 2 new drugs have been added to that list, with several more in the pipeline. Suddenly, there's momentum. Well, thank you. Absolutely. Well, behind every new drug are clinical trial participants. And at our Lois and Solia ALS clinic, we hosted clinical trials for both of the new drugs that were approved last year. Thanks to donors like you, we were able to offer the people we serve access to these trials. And thanks to those participants, the entire ALS community has better treatments for this disease. That doesn't happen unless people like you step up and ask, how can I help? Tonight, we will honor the team from First Bank Chicago, who have been doing just that for more than 20 years. Thank you. We can look at that progress from another angle, too. Much in the same way that Les Turner's family realized what was missing in the ALS field in 1977, our honorees, Brian Wallach and Sandra Abrevaya, took a shocking diagnosis and figured out how to fill in the gaps to make things happen in ALS advocacy. Now, because people with ALS are taking the lead and demanding more, we have increased federal funding and a new strategic plan focused on ALS research. We have much needed improvements in quality of life. We have new hope. As Erin said, thank you. As Erin said, this is a very personal cause for many of us. I lost my mother, Sally, to ALS, but time and again, we find that while ALS is classified as a rare disease, it really isn't rare at all. When you talk to someone about the Les Turner ALS Foundation, and I encourage you to do that, you'll find an astonishing number of people who have a cousin, a family friend, a colleague they lost to this disease. ALS ripples through the lives of everyone who cares for and loves that person. It causes a sense of loss that time cannot heal. We never forget them. But we move forward together toward a cure. Thank you all for being part of this movement.
Thank you, Erin and Andrea. So before I introduce our next speaker, okay. They deserve it. I do want to take a moment to recognize some special people who are in the room. I will ask you to hold your applause until the end so I can name them all. First, I'd like to acknowledge Joan and Paul Rubschlager, AbbVie, American Airlines, Amylyx Pharmaceuticals, First Bank Chicago, Mayor Brown, Mitsubishi Tanabe, Pharma America, and Northwestern Feinberg School of Medicine. Thank you all for your extraordinary generosity and that of all our sponsors tonight. To the researchers, clinicians, and healthcare professionals at the Les Turner ALS Center at Northwestern Medicine, I'm reminded of how Dr. Lisa Wolf was described as the MacGyver of breathing at last year's gala. I'll never forget that. But that's the kind of people you are. You're brilliant and caring, and we are so fortunate to have you. And to our founders, including Harvey and Bonnie Gaffin, who are just ahead of me, and the family of Les Turner, we are grateful for your visionary work, honored to walk in your footsteps. Yeah, I know you're supposed to hold them, but I think we do have to have some applause for that family. Yeah. To the members of the Foundation's Board of Directors who volunteer their time and guidance throughout the year, which is so essential to the growth and success of this organization. And to the team responsible for the success of this event and the delivery of our unparalleled programs and services, the Foundation's staff now join me in thanking all of these amazing people. And now we go on to our awards. Since her ALS diagnosis in December of 2021, Janie Gobelli has become an ALS research ambassador and a strong voice in the fight against ALS. To present the Hope Through Caring Award, please give a warm welcome to Janie Gobelli.
Good evening. Everyone who has been diagnosed with ALS knows that things can change quickly with this disease. At first, I had lost the strength and dexterity in my right hand, but then within months, I needed support walking, and soon it became a challenge just to get up and down the stairs outside of our home at my front door. Another thing that people with ALS understands is that we don't have the luxury of planning ahead and solving these problems when the time feels right. In the words of the great ALS activist, Sandy Morris, until you've lived under the ALS clock, you don't really grasp urgency. Well, if you can't get in and out of your house, that's pretty urgent. Fortunately, we were able to apply for a grant with the Les Turner ALS Foundation to help with the cost of installing a wheelchair lift outside our home. We were approved and we were able to get it built quickly. Today, that lift allows me to get in and out of the house with my walker or my wheelchairs. It has given me independence. And that means so much to me and my family. That grant was possible because of funding from First Bank Chicago. Like I said, things change quickly with ALS, and you learn to recognize what you can count on. For more than 20 years, the people of First Bank Chicago have been making it possible for stories like this through the support of the Les Turner ALS Foundation. That's something that you can count on, and that's what caring is all about. I am happy to present the Hope Through Caring Award to the Chief Executive Officer and President of the First Bank Chicago, Eric Ephraim. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That was very inspirational. Thank you very much. So all I want to say is, we feel very fortunate to be in a position to provide that kind of support. We feel very fortunate to have Harvey Gaffin on our board of directors. He's a tremendous board member, and I know we're not the only people in this room that want to thank Harvey all the time. And also very fortunate to have the employees that we have that provide the volunteering and the service to this organization and many others. So we're very appreciative of the position we're in and very fortunate to be able to help, and we want to continue to help for many years to come. So thank you.
Thank you, Eric, and congratulations to everybody from First Bank Chicago. Our next award is named for family members of Les Turner and two of the founders of the Les Turner ALS Foundation who remain active on the board of directors today. The chair emeritus, Harvey Gaffin, and his wife, Bonnie. Harvey and Bonnie, would you please stand and get the recognition you so well deserve? Just look what all you've helped create. Our next speaker represents the 5th District of Illinois in the U.S. House of Representatives. I'm going to go off script for a moment because I need to tell you something. On January 6th, 2020, you remember what happened at the U.S. Capitol. This is not a political speech. And we were on the air covering the events and wanted a voice inside the Capitol. Good luck reaching somebody inside the Capitol that day. But I thought, I'm going to call Mike Quigley's cell phone. And I did. He told me later he did not accept phone calls from his wife, his family, other networks, but he saw it was me and WGN and he took the call. And he stayed with us on air before we knew what was going to transpire. The gunshot, the whole thing, he stayed with us on air and stayed with us till the end, live coverage. That conversation turned out to be the only live, on-the-spot coverage that happened that day from inside the Capitol with a member of Congress, and that conversation is now housed within the Library of Congress. I just want to let you know that I appreciate Congressman Mike Quigley. But that's not why he's here tonight. In 2020, Mike introduced the Act for ALS to create a new pathway to deliver treatment for neurodegenerative diseases. The bill received overwhelming bipartisan support, was signed into law by President Biden in December 2021. To present the Harvey and Bonnie Gaffman Advancements in ALS Award, please welcome Congressman Mike Quigley.
Thanks, Paul. Hey, for those of us who grew up with WGN and Cubs baseball, Ray Rayner, Bozo Circus, what else were you going to do? Thank you, Paul, and good evening, and thank you for all who are helping deal with this cause. Let me say at the beginning that I think we all recognize the last several years have been tough for people in my business and for our government and for our public. We can be forgiving for being discouraged, even cynical, and disconnecting with the system. If Brian and Sandra are to be thanked for anything beyond what we're talking about tonight, is, let me tell you, they gave our democracy a much needed shot of adrenaline, of optimism and hope. And for that alone, they deserve our honor and our praise. Because thanks to Brian and Sandra, we have a chance to once and for all end ALS. Not just end ALS, but give people living with the disease access to promising treatments and improve the research infrastructure we need to one day find a cure. In the early days of Brian being diagnosed, they founded IMALS. Shortly thereafter, Brian and Sandra came into my office in Washington, D.C. and discussed needing help to navigate a system not designed for a disease like this. It was obvious the urgency was real, and we all had a lot to learn. But who better to teach us and teach all of us the ins and outs of this disease than Brian and Sandra? Let me tell you, this was a powerful lobbying session. When they left the office, I talked with my staff and said, we've got to get this done. And there was silence in the room. and a whistle, because this was going to be a tough one. The fact that it had extraordinary bipartisan support and it had overwhelming support in its final votes should not diminish how much work this took for a lot of people, especially Brian and Sandra. But it wasn't just their political and communication skills that set them apart. It was their determination, their drive, and above all, their unwillingness to take no and even hell no for an answer. And one of the toughest things I watched in my time in D.C., in July 2021, they were scheduled to come to Washington to testify before the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health. They were forced to wait for 8 hours before they could testify. Most people in this situation would have been forced to wait this long, would have packed up their things and left, but not them. They waited and waited and waited, and when they spoke to Congress to express the dire need the ALS community is in, they bared their soul that hearing in providing the closing argument for their lives. And it worked. After years of relentless advocacy, their testimony finally broke down the doors that had been closed to them. Things began to take shape. By the end of the year, Act for ALS was signed into law by President Biden. Indeed, instead of sitting on the sidelines, they transformed tragedy into purpose. Ultimately, we need policy that is driven by the patient's real-lived experiences. They know the ups and downs. They know the needs of the community better than policymakers, better than researchers and science. I am honored that Brian and Sandra chose me and my staff. Kudos to my staff, Allison and David, to be a vehicle for their vision. None of this would have happened without them. I will look back on my journey with them, on the things we have done and the things we have yet to do, as one of the most transformative projects of my life, and for everyone else in this room. And for all of that, and for the work we continue to do, thank you, and God bless you for this extraordinary effort. Thanks again.
When you're told the world that you believed you were going to live in is no longer there, you have to either grow up into a ball or act.
When a former Obama staffer was diagnosed with ALS, he was given 6 months to live.
And he's using his political chops to try to change the future of the disease.
We found out Brian had ALS the day we came home from the hospital with our second daughter.
After that initial period of shock, the question we asked was, no one's ever beaten this thing, how do we find a way to do it?
They took this extraordinary personal challenge and said, well, we're not going to be victims. We're going to go out and make things happen because that's who they are.
What we're doing here is not that different from a political campaign.
To get to a cure, it's going to take a totally new playbook.
On diseases like ALS, the healthcare system is broken.
There have been huge advances, yet patients can't get access to these treatments.
This is what we aim to do. Build a patient-centric movement that helps bring the people living with this disease out of the shadows and help them lead the fight. If we cure ALS, we have the potential to cure Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS, and a litany of other diseases, because they're actually all connected.
Someone told me, you have to meet this guy. He's going to change the world of ALS. And he did.
It is one of those moments where you look around and think, this could actually work.
So give me tomorrow and we can laugh at yesterday, but I won't pretend there ain't nothing wrong today. And I don't want to close my eyes on the progress that we made, but for every inch there is a mile of mistakes. Yeah, so go on, oh, go on, my baby, go on, oh honey, oh, go on, oh, go on, my baby, go on, all the way.
Brian and Sandra.
Brian likes to show off his smile when he gets to take off the mask. Can you see everybody, Brian? You want to pull back? Yeah, you should just stand in front. There you go. Whew. All right, we're both tearing up. Sorry. Thank you, Congressman Quigley. When we first heard the news of this honor, we actually asked if we could share it with Mike, because few members of Congress have worked harder and smarter on behalf of ALS families over the last several years than Mike. Mike not only sponsored Act for ALS, there you are, we're gonna throw our love at you, but he navigated every single legislative hurdle with incredible persistence and urgency on behalf of this community. And in what qualifies as lightning speed for DC, we turned this bill into law with an army of advocates behind Quigley. As Brian likes to say on social media, we should all be like Mike. Thank you so much, Congressman Quigley, please. We are also so grateful to be here with the other amazing honorees and the amazing teams from Les Turner and Northwestern. This gala was actually one of the very first events that we attended after being diagnosed in 2017, when Brian was 37 years old. We showed up that night, we were dressed to the nines. I think I wore red again. When you know your color, you know your color. And Brian, at the time, could easily walk and talk, and he really only had a little bit of weakness in his left hand. And to the average person, no one could tell he had ALS, but we had a very clear and proactive diagnosis. We sat at a table at this Les Turner Gala with other families who were recently diagnosed. At first, Andrea, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to handle that, but we soon started talking to our table. Maybe it was the couple of glasses of wine I was drinking quickly. Maybe it was the fact that Brian is a 100% extrovert, but we ended up meeting an incredible couple, Brian and Lori Andre, that night from the Chicago area. And Lori is kind of famous if you've heard of her very successful small business, Lori's Shoes. And they are fellow entrepreneurs. And we started talking about the space, the progress being made, and the possibilities that lay ahead. And at that dinner, that first Les Turner dinner, the wheels were set in motion for what and how Brian and I and the new friends we were making could contribute to moving this fight forward. Brian then spent about 7 months flying around the country, surveying the landscape of ALS nonprofits to make sure that whatever it was that we decided to do was additive and not duplicative of existing efforts. In his conversations with physicians, patients, and nonprofits, it illuminated a real need to organize and empower the ALS community as advocates, in particular as legislative advocates, so they could transform the system in ways that could help speed the end of this disease. We gathered people from across the community who believed that they could make a difference in changing the federal funding levels for ALS, changing the speed with which families can access disability benefits, and most importantly, with Congressman Quigley, changing the speed with which families can access promising new therapies that are still in the clinical trial pipeline, because we're on the ALS clock, as Sandy Morris told us. As it turned out, legislative advocacy was kind of what we were good at. Brian and I, met on the 2008 Obama campaign, and we worked in President Obama's White House. And we knew quite a bit about government, and we knew a few people who we thought could help. We came to Andrea at the time, and we told her what we wanted to do and explained how it was complementary to what Les Turner did, and without a moment of hesitation, she agreed wholeheartedly. I just want to take a moment to elevate something really critical here. At that moment, it took real leadership and commitment to furthering progress for a disease as sector as a whole to embrace a couple of nutty kids like us and to say immediately, yes, just tell me how I can help, which is exactly what Andrea said. In just 4 years, these advocates, in partnership with Les Turner and a network of ALS groups, have changed every facet of the system. They have increased federal funding for ALS research by hundreds of millions of dollars from the government. They passed the Social Security Disability Act, which eliminates the waiting period for ALS families to get benefits. And with Congressman Quigley at the helm, they passed a historic piece of legislation that radically changes the speed with which ALS families can get access to new therapies. And we collectively spent years making the case for new treatments, and just a few months ago, as Andrea mentioned, we won our first battle with the first new ALS drug approval in the last 5 years since Radicava, and the third in history, Relyvrio. If you are enjoying the sometimes discomforting taste of Relyvrio and its life-extending benefits, just know that it was not only the incredible leadership and team at that company and clinicians and researchers, but it was also an army of patients and caregivers who fought tooth and nail for FDA to approve that drug. That is not too shabby for a group of people who were told to go home and get their affairs in order. And through every stage of this fight over the last 5.5 years, as we have worked to stay as strong as possible to keep up with the pace of this advocacy, the teams at Les Turner and Northwestern have cared for Brian. They have cared deeply, they have cared tenaciously, and they have cared authentically. And for so many families in the Chicagoland area, they have been a literal lifeline. On a personal note, we want to thank Andrea for everything you've done for us, for your friendship and support on every level. And before I close it out, Brian, I know you wrote this with me, but I want to pause and see if you want to add something you think we left out. Just a few things. No bad dad jokes, okay? On the table outside was a word. Hope. That is everything. For people and families who are living with this disease. I look around this room and I see one thing. Hope. As a patient, I just want to say thank you. You could be anywhere tonight, but you are here. And that and that gives me hope. And two last things. Let's effing do this. And good night, Moon.
I want to ask for another round of applause for our first award recipients. First being Chicago and Sandra and Brian, but I got to tell you, some people use the word hero and throw it around. That's heroic. For those of you who have been joining us from home, our live stream is now coming to a close, but you can make a gift or bid online at our silent auction. Just visit hopethroughcaring.org. Wherever you are, we do hope you are well, and we thank you for supporting ALS care and research. For everybody else who's here, we will be back in a bit with the live auction and entertainment, but for now, please enjoy your dinner.